Running your collection like a general manager of a sports franchise. Food for thought in this video. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle Haas. And in this video, I'm going to talk about running your collection like the general manager of a sports franchise. This is something I've been thinking about a lot and have been applying to my own collection over these last few months or so. And I feel like I've really started to get a good grasp on it and something I kind of want to share with you guys in case you found it helpful. But before I get into the video for today, if you guys could drop me a like or a comment or subscribe if you're enjoying the content, help support the channel, do one of those things, and I would appreciate it. All right, that said, yes, I am talking about being the GM of your collection in this particular video here today. Yeah, I know this is kind of an interesting, wild topic. I don't know, hopefully you guys are going to enjoy something like this, but this is definitely something that I've been thinking about a lot, and I've been kind of applying some of these tools and techniques to my own collection, and I found it to be very successful. All right, so how I kind of want to talk about this topic in this video here today is that I sort of outlined some bullet points that I'm just going to kind of go through, and all of them are kind of analogous to what it would take to sort of build a championship sports team. Now, I don't know if you guys are sports fans out there, but I personally have been watching a lot of NBA, a lot of NHL recently. They're in their playoffs, and there's one team in particular that I just have a total admiration for, and that right now is the Tampa Bay Lightning. One of the reasons I am looking so fondly on them is that, you know, they won a Stanley Cup in 2004. They were the Stanley Cup winners last season, and they are once again in the Stanley Cup finals here today. And I just think that it's really interesting how they were sort of able to kind of rebuild their franchise. And I kind of looked over some of their moves, and I kind of read up on what they did over the years to kind of get back to the championship glory. And that's one of the things that I think is really interesting with regards to how I want to apply it to comic book collecting today, because the moves that they made over their journey are things that I think that we as comic book collectors can actually do for ourselves if we want to get our hands on you know, those Stanley Cup grails, so to speak, within this hobby. Now let's pretend that we are the Seattle Kraken, right? We're the new expansion franchise. We're starting our comic book collection today. Well, what is the first thing that we actually have to do as the general manager? Well, in my opinion, the very first step that you need to take is build an identity, right? If we're running a sports franchise, we need to build an identity. What is our team going to be? Who are we going to be? What are we going to represent? How does that play into the culture we're creating? And as it relates to comic book collecting, you know, this is the age-old question of what do you want to collect? Of course, there's no wrong way to collect comic books, but you have to at some point ask yourself, well, what is it that you like about comic books? Is it a certain era that you like? Maybe you like Bronze Age stuff. Is it a certain character that you like? Maybe you're a fan of Wolverine. Maybe you like modern stuff. Maybe you like indie stuff. Maybe you like DC. Whatever the case is, you have to decide and build your identity. You have to decide for your franchise, this is the way that we're going to play. We're going to play this way. We're going to win this way. And everything that we do leading up to that journey of a whatever NBA championship or Stanley Cup needs to like push towards that goal ultimately. So for me personally, you guys may know this, but I personally like Silver Age comic books and I like Copper Age. Those are the two eras I like the most. Right now, I am doing my Avengers Grail run. The Avengers are a huge team. I'm a huge fan of them. So for me, building a championship team is building towards things that acquire me Silver Age books and acquire me great Copper Age books and build me towards that Avengers Grail run, right? That is what a championship path is for myself. So my identity is those things: Avengers, Silver Age, first appearances in the Silver Age, and some first appearances in the Copper Age. So I have quickly defined my identity, where I want to go with the franchise, and everything that I do in my collection should ultimately build towards that goal. All right, now that we know the identity of the Seattle Kraken, we have to do the next thing. And what is the next thing that I think that you need to do? That is establish your franchise player. Establish your franchise player. Well, no team can ever win a championship without stars. I don't care, what you think out there, but like, think about this. Who wins the Super Bowls? Tom Brady's. Who wins NBA championships? LeBron James. Who's going to win the Tampa Bay Lightning right now? Probably Steven Stamkos, Nikita Kucherov. You need star players. You need franchise players. And I think the same can be said for your comic book collection. Now that you know you want to collect, say, Avengers comic books in the Silver Age, you need to establish who are your franchise players. Who are going to be the main comic books that you build your comic book collection around? For me, that question was very simple to answer. That was my Avengers #1, right? That was the ultimate grail that I knew that I wanted to get my hands on this book. This was going to be my quote unquote franchise player. Now once I got that franchise player, then I could start to sort of build my team around them. But for you guys out there, when you're doing your collection, you need to ask yourselves, okay, you need to know which way you want to go. And then once you know which way you want to go, you need to answer your question, okay, well, who or what is it in this path that you ultimately want to get your hands on? You need to establish a franchise player. Of course, this can be anything from an expensive comic book. Maybe it doesn't have to be an expensive comic book. It could be a cheap comic book, but ultimately you have to know who it is within your identity that you want to build your collection around. And that, of course, leads us to the next point here, which is create a roster to support. Create a roster to support. So once you establish your franchise player, now you got to build the team around them. Now you got to have the role players. You got to have, the supporting cast. So for me personally, you guys, of course, know I have this wall behind my head. Well, effectively for me, this wall is my starting roster. Right? Like this wall is the wall. Every day when I come into this room, I look at the comic books on that wall. I admire them. I cherish them, and everything that's on that wall effectively is like a starting player for me, or is a comic book that I am definitely holding in my collection. Like if you're not on that wall, presumably to me, could be on the trading block. That's not to say that I'm going to sell you, but if you're not on that wall, your starting position is not guaranteed. So I think for you guys out there, we need to establish a supporting cast around our franchise player. So for me, again, Avengers #1 is my franchise player. I need to build a supporting cast around them. So I like Silver Age, I like Copper Age. You'll happen to notice that I think 99% of the books behind my head are either great Silver Age blue chips, or they're Copper Age books that I really, really like, their first appearances and things like that. But all of these things are sort of building up and supporting my franchise player, which is Avengers #1. And I want to get other Avengers books, of course, to support that as well. So for you guys, you need to build that supporting cast. And of course, your supporting cast also, again, doesn't need to be star players. These can be things like locker room guys. Everybody has X-Men #1 from the 90s. Those are great locker room comic books. Me, I got my Darkhawk. That's never going to be like this insanely expensive book, but at the same time, it's my locker room, comic book for myself. It is a good role player. I want it in my collection. It's good for morale within the team. And ultimately, these are all comic books that help support my star players. Now, any comic book that I have that doesn't align with my goals, right? Doesn't align with me wanting to collect Silver Age stuff or Copper Age stuff, or doesn't fit into my identity. Those are all comic books that I have on the trading block, which ultimately leads to this next bullet point, which is have resources to improve the team. Have resources to improve the team. Okay, well, we all know that, when you're a general manager, when you have a sports franchise, everyone has the lottery draft, right? So, the general managers are constantly drafting young talent, new prospects. Maybe they're going out in free agency. They're signing those like undrafted free agents, so they're constantly acquiring resources and talent that they can either use to eventually grow into a roster player on their team, or B, use as trading chips to acquire players that ultimately fit within their team's identity. So for me, these are, essentially, or for us, these are those spec books, right? These are these, good deal first appearances or whatever that you might find in a back bin under FMV. So these are books that you need to acquire in your collection so that eventually you can use that equity and use them as trading chips to improve your team. So again, I have a whole bin of a short box that is just full of key trading chips, I like to call them. Essentially, they're like either they're spec books or, maybe not even spec books. Maybe they are books that have value that eventually I know that I'm going to trade. For instance, this is where I put my Eternals #1. Again, a Bronze Age book. Eternals, not a superhero team that I'm particularly fond of, but one that I found at a good deal. And I always knew that this is a book that I'm going to trade for something that fits into my team identity later on down the line. Other books in that particular bin are things like, for me, Nova #1. Nothing against Nova, but again, a Bronze Age character that I'm not particularly fond of, but I'm sitting on as sort of like an investment book that I'm going to use as a trading chip later on down the line. And then also I have books like, Eternals, I said, Nova #1, and I have books like, Avengers Annual 10, first appearance of Rogue, things like that. These don't fit into what I want to collect. They don't fit into my team identity, and these are going to be books that I'm going to move when they get hot or at the right time, which of course leads us to the final tip, which I wanted to talk about here, and that is know when to make a push. Know when to make a push. Okay, and so, like we're building our sports franchise, what teams like to do, they're leading to the playoffs. We know that we have a good team. We're looking really solid. We got the pieces in place, but maybe we're just missing that one book that kind of completes our collection for the time. Well, we might, lead up to the trade deadline or make the playoff push, and we got to make that trade. We got to know when to make that push. So these are, capitalizing on opportunities like Eternals trailer comes out, you got to take that Eternals book and you got to move it. You can't always sit on books thinking that you're going to always capture top dollar for them. You have to know when to make a push. You have to know when to move an asset. And this can also be stuff that where it's like, hey, sometimes we all want to sit on books to have them hit the highest value possible, but other times if you can just move a few today, maybe you're not getting the top dollar, but you can move that into something that ultimately helps your team, helps your collection. You got to know when to make those moves. So for me personally, I have books that are always on the chopping block, and I constantly cycle through them. I constantly look over my roster and think to myself, okay, is it time to sell first appearance of Rogue, Avengers Annual #10? Maybe I'm not getting top dollar for it, but if I can sell it right now for $100, maybe I can move that into the Silver Age book that I actually want because a good deal came around and I actually want to capitalize for my roster. So I don't know. That is something that I think is really interesting. That was kind of what I've been doing recently with how I manage my collection. I truly treat it like a sports franchise where I'm trying to win an NBA championship or a Lombardi Trophy or Stanley Cup. I'm very clear with my identity of my team, what I want to collect, and I have different kind of bins that I sort of catalog my collection in, where it's like, these are my trading chips, these are my spec books, these are ones that I'm keeping forever, and I'm constantly looking through and trying to figure out when the right time to make those playoff pushes are. So anyways, I don't know if that was interesting for you guys. Hopefully you guys kind of thought that this was interesting. It's a little bit of food for thought, I think. Again, there's no wrong way to collect. There's, you guys don't have to sell books or anything like that, but this is just something that I've kind of adopted for myself and has been really, really helpful as I've kind of contextualized how I think about my collection. And it's been really great because, not everyone has infinite budget. So this is a great way for, you to remind yourself which books you want to ultimately sell or move on with, because you have to have the clear picture of well, this is where I want to go ultimately with my collection, and what are the moves that I need to do to get me there, because there is where happiness lies within comic books for me personally. Anyways, that is all I have for this video. Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content. Let me know what you guys think about this analogy, if you think it's interesting or has any credence, and I will see you in the next video.